Let's just see if we are live here. We are live. Okay, so Tanja, let me just go in. Normally it has me actually, it normally actually has me tag right at the beginning, which it did not. So let me just make sure I can go in and tag you and add you to this right away.
Okay. Just silencing my phone too, so it doesn't go crazy.
Okay. So I'm not going to write a whole ton because I want to be able to make sure it goes up, and I can always go in and update it later.
Okay.
All right. You should have a notification on your side so you can post that to your timeline. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to introduce everybody to the series. So welcome everybody to Strong as a Mother. My name is Stacey Uhrig, and my guest today is Tanja Hawkinson. If you are not familiar with Strong as a Mother, let me just give you a really quick 1-minute recap. I am a mindset coach. I work a lot with people on the areas of resilience and life challenges. And when coronavirus hit in March, I noticed a huge wave of extra anxiety and extra depression in people. And I knew in my heart of hearts that this was going to be a hard, long road. But I also knew in my heart of hearts that likely for a large portion of people would not be the hardest thing that they ever go through. So I started this series with the idea of interviewing people who have been through something harder than COVID. And I've had a wide variety of guests. I've had people who have been bedridden for years due to long-term illness. I have interviewed people with bipolar disorder. I have interviewed gratitude psychologists, a whole host of different people to give you a different perspective and to change the lens through which you see hard things. Because it is my personal belief that we've done harder things than deal with a pandemic. So I want to introduce to you, are you able to get on, Tanja? Are you on?
Yep.
Okay, great. So with that said, throughout this period of time, 8, 9, 10 months that we've been in this pandemic, I've done a variety of different interview series, and it's kind of come in and out. Recently, I was reached out to by my friend Tanja. So Tanja and I are actually business partners in the same business. We're both consultants in Rodan and Fields. That's how I know her. I usually get to see her once a year when we go on different trips together. And Tanja reached out because Tanja just recently lost her son. And she lost her son to suicide. And it is a circumstance in which she really feels called to come to the table and share his story for a variety of reasons. And she asked me about this platform, and she asked me if I thought it would be a good way for her to share her story. And I think that it is. I come to this feeling very honored and taking the responsibility very seriously. When we're talking about suicide, as I'm never in a position to want to cause extra trauma or to trigger trauma. Just as a real side note and like to bring a little levity to the situation, you know, as the host of this, I get a little anxious, especially when I'm doing something so significant like an interview like this. And about a half hour before we're supposed to kick off, the guy from the cable company came and shut off my entire intranet. And I had no access to getting in touch with Tanja and letting her know I was getting delayed or being able to get this set up. And I was getting ready. I was trying to calm down. And it just occurred to me, because I had said to Tanja a couple of days ago that I've been praying to Ryan, her son, to guide me through this so I can honor her space and give her a safe space. And as soon as all this stuff started, be careful what you wish for, because Ryan's a jokester. So as soon as this confuddle-ish happened this morning, I was like, oh my God, he's testing me. He's just going to see if he can rattle me just a little bit before I have a chance to speak with his mom today. So thanks, Ryan, for that. Right. So I'm just going to let Tanja kick it off, introduce herself, share with you a little bit about why she's coming to us today, and I'm going to help guide her through this next 30 minutes. So Tanja, I'm going to give it to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you for allowing me to do this on this platform, because it's very important to, as they say, stop the stigma and end that. And the more people that talk about this stuff, the more we bring it to light, the more it becomes readily aware, just like having cancer. It's not a stigma anymore. So thank you. My name's Tanja Hawkinson. Just a quick little intro of me. I'm a mom of 5, 4 girls and a boy. And he was the baby. We have 14 grandchildren. And we've been married 27 years this year. Actually, on Saturday. What is today? I don't even know what. The 10th? Okay, so Saturday, yes. Such is life, man. And we, as Stacy said, we met through RNF, so we have a connection there. And you know, life is crazy. We've been through a lot. Ryan was the baby of the family, and all of the older girls absolutely freaking adored him. From the time he was maybe 9 months old, I think. He rarely slept with us because they would fight over him. No, it's my turn. No, it's my turn. So he was constantly being loved by everyone around him. He was like the best baby in the world. Everybody says that your first one usually is, but he really was amazing. He slept mostly through the night, right from the get-go. He hardly ever cried. He was always smiling, you know, and as he grew older, always laughing and cracking jokes. And as I told Stacy, he's quite the jokester. So, you know, he's left us signs already, and, you know, playing with us. So I'm expecting more of that. So if we get cut off, it's probably him.
I'll take it.
Yes. You know, when Ryan was younger, there were things that, you know, I was telling Stacy about this. There were things that you look back on in your life and go, maybe that was a sign, and we just didn't catch it. And there's so many people that I've talked to since Ryan passed that they have the same thing. They didn't see signs that were actually signs of something that they needed to address. And one example I shared with Stacy was you look at your child, you know, when they're like 9, 10, 11 years old, that age where they're in school and kids are mean and they come home and they're upset. You typically go, oh, okay, you know, brush it off. Kids are just, you know, a little bit cruel. You just have to walk away. You have to learn how to let that roll off you. But sometimes it's more than that. And that's kind of some of the stuff that we've missed. And I'd like other parents to know, look at that stuff, talk to them about it, and dig deeper into what really is happening. Don't just brush it off as kids that age they act that way. Not always. So, you know, ask yourself the tough questions and talk to them, because that's some things that you look back on and miss.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, Ryan passed away in September. You have been always very forward about sharing that Ryan took his life.
Yep.
And when you and I spoke and we talked about what this sharing would look like, we decided to break it into 4 parts. Mm-hmm. We would talk about the early warning signs.
Yep.
We would talk in the second part about what it means to love a child with addiction, you know, mm-hmm. to really raise and be loving on a child with addiction. I think that is such a difficult thing to do, to love any family member with addiction.
Yep.
through addiction. The third part will be his passing. And then the fourth part will be kind of, how do you move forward from here? So if we can talk a little bit about the early warning signs or the early years, at what age did you notice that perhaps things were a little bit more than just, having a problem at school?
I would say probably right around 9 or 10 when I, thinking back on it now, when, like I say, that he'd come home and he'd be upset, and even maybe depressed now looking at the signs, that kids were mean and he didn't know how to handle it. And as a parent, you don't necessarily know how to guide them through that because you don't really know that it's not just kids being mean. So that's why I say, ask more questions, dig deeper with your children. So that's one of the things. The other one that we really, when he was about, I want to say 13, 14-ish, right at high school age. He was so smart, you guys, like math, he was just a whiz, and when it came to people and emotions, he was very good at that stuff. So he would go to school and I'd get his emails or calls from his teacher saying he's not turning in his work. And I'm like, I helped him with that last night. And then I'd be like, dude, where's your work? And he's like, oh, it's in my backpack. Why didn't you turn it in? Like, we did it. I helped you with some of it. And you just didn't turn it in. And come to find out, stuff like that is also potentially, I'm not saying it is for certain, I'm not a doctor, right? But potentially signs of ADHD or ADD. And you don't know that unless somebody helps you through that. It's not something you just research and go find out.
And
so, those are a couple of the really big ones.
Yeah, as someone else who's also had to manage that, it's not always what people think it is. It doesn't really necessarily show itself. I've known plenty of kids and people with ADHD that are not hyperactive, right? So I've always assumed you have to be hyperactive, who were kind of inattentive, incredibly bright, super disorganized, right? Like, just like you said, where's that paper?
Messy bedrooms.
I lost it somewhere between leaving home and getting to school. I'm like, how? I don't know how that works. So, and of course, we want to preface a couple of things when we're talking about this. Neither one of you, you might or I are medical experts or experts on any range other than just life experience. But for you personally, and to be able to share with people, again, it wouldn't be the case for everybody. Why do you see that as being a connection to the path that he ended up going down?
Because with ADHD, what I have learned personally, we've been seeing a therapist, we've been reading books, and my personal experience is reading and talking to my therapist too, that ADHD and ADD left untreated can lead you to the path of addiction because they don't know how to deal with what is happening. And so potentially that is part of what caused Ryan to hit that road, because he couldn't deal with what was happening or not happening in some cases up here. And so to shut that off, drugs can do that for you. So I think that's part of, I'm not going to say it's all of it, but part of the reason.
I think, you and I have talked about this a lot. When we talk about stigma with mental health, we really need to break it down, especially now, because there are parents who may potentially watch this who have 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old children who would never want to outwardly have a conversation with anyone, that they have a fear that their child has a mental health illness, mainly because our society has created the stigma around it. If your child had cancer or diabetes or a physical health issue, it would not be an issue to discuss. But there's,
Exactly.
for some reason, people think that the mental health piece, there's control over it by the person, and they're opting to control or not to control it. And that is a huge misnomer, and it is a lie.
100%.
Mental health is just like any other type of health. We could just call illness, right? It doesn't matter if it's physical, mental, emotional, behavioral. It's an illness. And the problem right now that I find is probably a bigger pandemic than the one that we're dealing with the virus is that because people are not willing to talk about it, people are not getting help. So this would be the same as someone having cancer and never getting treatment. Someone knowing that they have some sort of illness that there's treatment for and not doing it because there's the stigma. There's also an issue with the insurance companies because they also see it with a stigma and they do not make it readily, easily accessible. To everyone.
We ran into that same thing, you know, when Ryan first, not to jump too far ahead, when he first started down the drug and addiction path, our insurance didn't cover squat. Like literally, they were like, "Oh, you're kind of on your own." Okay, great. You know, who has $10,000 or $20,000 to just throw out there to put your kid in a treatment facility and go through therapy? Not many, you know.
Right.
So thankfully, our insurance changed over the couple years after that, and it started to cover more and more because they realized that it was such a huge issue. And if you look up statistics right now on suicide since COVID started, it has exponentially increased. And it is sad, you know, that people are not getting the help they need just because they're afraid to reach out, you know.
What do you wish, if you knew now, if you knew then what you know now, what steps do you think you would have taken when Ryan was 9, 10, 13 years old?
One of the things that Ray and I kind of talked about was we would have absolutely put him in therapy. And, you know, when they get older, they can refuse it. So get them in it early, because then they can learn tips and tricks about how to deal with that stuff and potentially get the diagnosis of ADHD, because you can't just go to your doctor and say, "Hey, my kid has ADHD." There's a massive round of tests they do for this. It's not like it used to be. You don't just write a prescription and you're done. You know, and that's one of the things that I think could have helped him learn how to deal with what was happening in his head, you know.
Maybe we can share a little bit about some of the things that you saw. You mentioned before the not handing in the homework. That I think sometimes people don't know what ADHD looks like outside of hyperactivity. Can you share a little bit about the things that you know Ryan was challenged with because of having ADHD?
Oh, yeah. One of the things that, you know, it's funny because you look at your kids at that age and they have a messy bedroom, right? Not all of them do. But in a lot of cases, ADHD is either super organized or super messy. So that's one of the things, because he was always messy, like couldn't find anything. And one of the other signs that we saw a lot, or I did at least, was he would get super easily distracted. Like you'd give him something, some sort of task or whatever that he needed to take care of. And if it was not on a sticky note or a list showing exactly what he needed to do, he wouldn't make it past the first two, and he'd be like off way over here doing something completely different. And you're like, dude, you got to take care of this stuff. Oh yeah, I forgot. Okay. You know, the distraction is so fast for them. Like it's like a squirrel. I'm not even kidding. Like a squirrel. You go here, you go here, you go here. And that was one of the big ones because he totally gets distracted like that. So, are you still there, Stacy? I think you might have frozen.
I'm
Are you
sorry.
back?
Yes. I'm blaming Ryan.
For real. That's gotta
Could
be.
be my spotty internet, but I'm going to blame Ryan. So I don't know if people heard that, but you were saying having a hard time with lists, using sticky notes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Getting distracted.
so interestingly enough, I have a child that has ADHD, and one of the challenges that we always noticed was a refusal to use a planner. So people will say to me, "Oh, just have them make lists or have them," and it was very hard for my husband and I to accept the non-usage of a planner, because I think I'm definitely type A and my husband's definitely type A, and we couldn't imagine not having a system.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
my one child's system is writing everything on the hand, writing it up the arm, doing all these things. And I'm like, why don't you just use a plan? No. So like, and that was another sign that I didn't know about.
Yeah.
There's
There's so many.
The not handing in homework, super duper bright. I'd get messages, he didn't hand his homework. I don't understand. I watched him do it.
Yeah.
Where to go?
Yeah.
I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's got to be in your notebook or in your
backpack
somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, oh my God. So when you don't know that those are signs, which I did not know, and maybe you'd had this issue too, it can cause mass combustion in your house.
Oh yeah.
And it gets followed by statements of, why can't you just?
Yes.
Right? Why can't you just do this?
Yeah.
Why can't you just do that? And I also found that the biggest term that we were using, and of course there was a lot of guilt on my part when there was finally a diagnosis and a reason for all of it, was, you're just lazy.
Yep. Why are you so lazy?
Why are you so lazy? And when I realized that my son had this diagnosis, I had guilt, and because I felt I had shamed him by saying, why are you so lazy and why can't you just? And my favorite is, you should be able to. I said that all the time, which is, to me, should equals shame, because should means that I'm telling you you're doing something wrong.
Yep.
And that everybody else can do it that way and you can't. So I had a tremendous amount of guilt, because I realized that the language I was using in frustration was placing shame on my child. And the steps I took when I did find out was, I apologized. I was like, listen, I will take full ownership and recognize that these were the things I was saying, and not necessarily in a calm manner, because you're trying to fear your kid into doing it.
Yes.
And I take ownership that was not the best way for me to act. And I apologize. I wish I had known. And for those parents who are watching now, in the middle of this pandemic, when you have all these kids that are schooling at home, thank God I knew it prior to this, because I knew what I needed to put into place in order for him to survive virtual schooling and hybrid learning.
Yep.
Because otherwise, all that shaming would have been tenfold.
Exactly.
Right? So let me ask you this, and this is something I think is going to be a common thread throughout the 4 parts. And it's something that you and I talked about. I know that you are associated with a number of different groups of parents who have lost a child from suicide. And you've shared with me that the common thread in all of those groups is shame and parenting a child. So, we just talked right now just about the shame and guilt of that. Like, how do you reconcile that part of it? Because I think that that's kind of the elephant in the middle of the room for so many parents that are watching.
Yeah, yeah. For me personally, I mean, we kind of talked about this. I've always been a person that can, I don't know if you've ever seen the comedian that talks about his nothing box. I'm one of those people that can put stuff in those little boxes and pull it out when I need to. It's how I get through. I can put that in the box and I can work through it with my therapist. I can put it in the box and I can read books and help with that. One of the things that has really helped us is, I don't know if, everybody has their own beliefs, but we pray a lot, a lot. We read books that help with working through grief, shame, guilt, all of that. Because let me tell you, parents that lose a child to suicide really have a hard time with the amount of guilt that they have about things they did or didn't do when their kids were growing up. And what I posted about it the other day, and what I want parents to know is once they pass about 13 or 14, you can't own that yourself anymore. They can think and they can choose. So I want parents to know it's not your fault. You can't own that. There are parts that you can own. Yes. Things like, saying you should have, you could have, why can't you? Those things you can own. You can't own their decision to do it. That is a huge thing that it takes people years, and sometimes they never get to that point. I'm lucky enough to be one of those people that my mindset is always positive. I rarely jump to that negative side and go down that dark hole. But a lot of people do. But don't stay there. Reach out for help, you guys. Seriously. There are so many people that can help. Even if it's just a friend to sit and hold your hand for a while. You got to reach out. Don't be afraid to. Because it's huge.
And I think that's important because there might be people that end up watching this that don't think that they have someone that they can go to for fear of other people's opinions or fear of being judged. Yep. And so do you have some resources? I know we have the National Suicide Prevention Hotline scrolling on the bottom, but do you have any resources that you would want to share as we wrap up this one part of places that people could go to for some community support?
Yeah, there's a lot of places locally that you can find. NAMI is one of them, NAMI. My brain just went dead. But it's the National Association of Mental Illness, I believe, is their acronym. And there's local chapters all over the place. So that's one place you can reach out to. I'm also a member of several groups on Facebook that are about parents surviving suicide. And nobody in there is a doctor. We just are there to support each other. And I can admit fully, it's sometimes very hard to be in those groups because there's a lot of triggers. But it's also very good because you're not alone. People are going through the same things that you are and working through it together, and just being there to listen and support somebody could make all the difference. And then a therapist, find one. It's huge. It's huge.
And to that point, yeah, I have a life coach that I work with as a way of me improving myself always, because I'm going down that path to offer that service to others. And I mentioned to her that we were going to be having this series, and she actually gave me the name of a therapist that doesn't but help families cope through the loss of a child or a family member through suicide. So when this is over, I'm going to actually take her contact information. I'm going to put that in the comments as well.
Excellent.
But I really hope, thank you. I see Patty Schmo. Patty is the person that I was just mentioning. She just made a comment. So we'll make sure that people follow Patty. But I think, what I really want to conclude with here is that you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. Like whoever's watching this, if the person that's watching this is contemplating suicide themselves, if they have a family member who is dealing with heartache and they feel like that is their best option, there are so many resources. And more importantly, it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help.
Yeah, that is huge.
The biggest
huge
sign of courage ever. It is the biggest sign of courage ever to get help. And, what I hope that we can do with this is, just like you said, stop the secrecy. There's no reason to shroud suicide or drug addiction or mental health in secrecy. And I will honestly say, total programming, every time I say those words, I get a sense of discomfort. And this is what I do all day long. If I say ADHD, suicide, mental health, drug addiction, I almost want to whisper it because that's the way we've been taught.
Yep.
We have to stop doing that. In 50s, people would talk about cancer like that cancer.
Yeah, exactly.
People will talk about cancer now.
Yep.
We need to break the stigma. We need to break the cycle. We need to be able to talk about it comfortably, myself included.
Yep.
And stop worrying about what other people think, because other people's opinions do not matter.
They don't. As much as you love people around you, they are not what drives this, and one other thing I wanted to mention, just because it popped in my head, it's got to be him too. Men, specifically, I'm talking to you right now. Men, go get help. Men are brought up to be so strong. I'm not supposed to cry. I'm the tough guy. Suck it up, buttercup. No, you're a human too. Go get the help. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. Go get the help.
I have a person that works specifically with men. I have two people in my coaching life that specifically work with men. And to your point, the one person will tell you her mission is just to end male suicide, because the rate of male suicide is so high.
It's way higher.
Because there is another level of shame associated when it comes to men when they have feelings. But the reality is that we're human beings, just like you said, and we're all designed to feel. And they're allowed to feel all things. And we really need, part of breaking the stigma is not just talking about it. It's changing everything. It's what everybody sees. It's okay to see men in emotional states. And
it's okay to cry.
He's a wuss, or what's wrong with him, or stopped acting like a girl. It's a ridiculous thing to say. You're human.
Yep.
And if you're feeling, that's a good thing.
Exactly.
It means you're alive. Right? It means that you have an ability to connect.
Yes.
So I want to thank you. I think we're at a really good stopping point, because as I mentioned to you at the beginning, that's the hardest part of interviews is finding that box that it can just fit in. I'm so grateful to you for helping me get this message across to people, because it's a huge passion of mine. If people are watching this on the replay, please, please, please put comments in. If you know someone that needs to hear this, share it with them. It's public. You can share it right to their messenger. You can simply give them the link. If you feel comfortable enough, you can tag them here. You may share this on your own personal timeline. The more the people can see this, the better. I think it's safe to say Tanya's pretty open book, that you can flood her direct message box, but I think that's been happening a lot lately.
It has, yes.
And of course, we'll put some resources right in the comments as well for NAMI. And I'll also put the link to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and all of the different, I'm actually going to put a couple of links to some websites since we talked so much about it today. So Tanya, you're a blessing and you're a light, and
Thanks,
Ryan kept you up. Yeah. Love you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody can stay tuned for next week's episode. Next week's episode, we're going to talk, it's going to be pretty raw, about having a child or a family member that has a drug addiction, and what that journey looks like, and what that loving looks like. So we can help people through that as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Stacy.
All right. Take care.